There is something music does to you that you cannot account for. Not the pleasure of a good melody, that is real, but it is not what this is about. The specific thing that happens when a piece of music arrives at exactly the right moment and bypasses every defense, every framework, every careful construction of the self that the ordinary day requires. It reaches something that words cannot reach, something that exists before the interpreting mind gets involved. Something that feels, in the moment of being reached, more fundamental than anything that can be said about it. You do not know what to do with this. The secular framework reduces it to neuroscience and calls it adequately explained, but the explanation does not account for the specific quality of what happened, the sense not of pleasure received, but of recognition, of being addressed, of something in you that has no name responding to something that also has no name. Hildegard of Bingen, the 12th century Benedictine abbess whose philosophy of the body we explored in an earlier episode, had a theology of music that addresses this precisely. She did not call music entertainment or even art in the modern sense. She called it the language of the soul before the fall, the form of communication that existed before human beings needed words to describe their separation from the divine. The thing that remains in the body and in the community when every other form of connection to the sacred has become difficult. When music bypasses your defenses, she would say, it is because it is reaching the part of you that was never separated, the part that speaks in a different register than the words allow. There is a specific poverty in the way most modern people relate to music, and it is not the poverty of not enough of it. We are surrounded by more music than any previous civilization has had access to. It is in the background of the commute, the restaurant, the grocery store, the workout. It has become, for most people, primarily a mood management tool, something to deploy at appropriate moments to produce appropriate emotional states, to relax, to energize, to buffer the silence that the ordinary day produces. It is used constantly and rarely received. Played but not listened to, present in the ears while absent from the attention. Hildegard's philosophy of music is the most direct possible challenge to this relationship. She did not compose background music. The 70-plus compositions she left behind, antiphons, hymns, sequences, the musical drama Ordo Virtutum, were designed for what she called the opening of the soul, for the specific, full-body, complete attention experience of a community singing together or receiving sung music together in the specific form of attention that she believed was the primary vehicle of divine communication. Music, for Hildegard, was not a vehicle of emotion, it was a vehicle of the divine, not metaphorically. The specific, physical, resonant experience of the human voice singing, the body vibrating with sound, the soul carried by the sound beyond the reach of the ordinary verbal mind, was, in her understanding, the closest available experience of the prelapsarian state, of what it was like before the separation, of what the soul still carries the memory of. This is why music does what it does when it arrives at the right moment. It is not that it makes you feel something, it is that it temporarily restores a connection that the ordinary conditions of the fallen world keep covered. We have already visited Hildegard's life in the earlier episode on the body and viriditas. What that episode did not fully explore is the music, the specific, extraordinary, genuinely unprecedented body of work that she produced alongside the visions and the medical texts and the cosmological writings.
She composed more music than any other known medieval composer, male or female. Her compositions are not merely quantitatively remarkable, they are qualitatively unlike almost anything else from her century. The melodic range is extraordinary. Her antiphons and sequences sometimes span 2 octaves or more, far beyond the conventional range of medieval sacred music. The melodies are sinuous, elaborate, ornate in a way that suggests not the application of learned compositional technique, but the direct transcription of something heard. She said that is exactly what they were. She described receiving her compositions the way she described receiving her visions, as transmissions that she then worked to render in the available form. She was not composing in the sense of the modern composer applying craft to material. She was transcribing what she heard, and what she heard was, in her description, the symphony of the angels, the music of the celestial realm that the human soul, in its fallen condition, dimly remembers, and that the act of singing allows it briefly to recover. She was also deeply practical about music's function. She argued in letters and treatises and the Scivias that the suppression of music in worship, which occurred when the Bishop of Mainz placed her community under interdict in the last years of her life, forbidding them to sing the divine office, was a spiritual atrocity. Not merely an inconvenience, the specific, serious, documentable harm of removing from the soul the primary vehicle by which it maintains its connection to the divine. She wrote to the bishop with the specific controlled fury that she reserved for ecclesiastical authorities who made decisions with consequences they did not adequately understand. She argued that the soul that is deprived of music is like the body deprived of water, that the singing was not an accessory to worship, it was the vehicle, the form in which the thing the worship was for could actually occur. The interdict was eventually lifted. She died in 1179, having seen the restoration of the singing that she had argued for with the same philosophical seriousness she brought to everything. The Theology of Music. Hildegard's arguments, drawn from the Scivias and her collected letters, that constitute the most serious medieval philosophy of music and that remain, 9 centuries later, the most philosophically precise account of what music does and why. Before the fall, before the separation from the divine that constitutes the human condition in the Christian understanding, the human being communicated with the divine in pure song. Not words accompanied by melody, pure melodic sound, the voice as the direct vehicle of the soul's orientation towards its source. Language, in this understanding, came after the fall. Words are the instrument of the fallen mind, useful, necessary, genuinely valuable, and operating at one remove from the directness that song provides. Music is what remains of the prelapsarian communication, not because it is literally the same thing, the separation has occurred, the conditions have changed, but because the physical act of singing, the body engaged, the breath moving through the instrument, the sound vibrating in the chest and the skull and the room, produces in the body a state that the verbal mind cannot produce. A state of coherence, of alignment, of the body and the soul moving in the same direction, animated by the same impulse for the duration of the music. This is why, for Hildegard, communal singing is not an activity to be scheduled among other activities. It is the primary act by which the community constitutes itself as a community, and by which each member of the community maintains the connection to the divine that the ordinary conditions of the fallen world tend to erode. To sing together is not to make pleasant music, it is to perform, in the available form, the thing that the community is actually for. She also argued something more specific and more practically important. She said that the body is the instrument of the soul, and the voice is the soul made audible. The voice is not a tool that the soul uses from a distance. It is the direct expression of what the soul is, its quality, its vitality, its degree of connection to the divine. A community whose voices are alive, whose singing is genuinely, fully embodied, not performed but expressed, is a community whose souls are alive. And a community whose singing has been suppressed, managed, replaced by passive reception of recorded music, is a community that has lost the primary vehicle of its own coherence.
Now the bridge. Because Hildegard was a 12th century Benedictine abbess, writing from within the framework of medieval Catholic theology and Benedictine communal practice. But here is what translates into every life. The piece of music that bypassed every defense and reached something you did not know was reachable. The experience of singing, actually singing, even poorly, even alone, and the specific quality of being in the body that the singing produces. The difference between music as background and music as attention, between having it present in the ears and actually listening with the full weight of your awareness, between receiving music as a mood management tool and allowing it to do what Hildegard says it is for. And the specific, available, entirely countercultural act that she prescribes, singing. Not performing, singing. The use of your own voice, however trained, however untrained, however self-conscious, as the direct, physical, breath-requiring, body-engaging vehicle of what the soul is. The act that the modern world has, with extraordinary efficiency, made mostly into a spectator experience. The act that Hildegard argues is not optional for a person who wants to maintain the connection that the ordinary conditions keep eroding. Here is what Hildegard on music asks of you, practically, today. First, listen to one piece of music with complete attention. Not as background, not while doing something else. One piece, completely received with the full weight of your attention from beginning to end, without the phone, without the multitasking, with the specific quality of presence that Hildegard brought to every act of worship, the recognition that what is happening matters and that partial attention is not sufficient to it. Notice what happens in the body, not what you think about the music, what happens in the body, where the music lands, what it touches that the verbal mind does not reach. This is Hildegard's primary datum, the specific, physical, pre-verbal response to music received fully, and it is available to anyone willing to stop managing the experience long enough to have it. Second, sing. Once, today, use your own voice in the way Hildegard describes, not performance, expression. The shower, the car, the empty room, a hymn if you have one, a song you know by heart, anything that requires your breath to move through your body and produce sound that is your own voice rather than someone else's. The duration matters less than the quality. 10 minutes of genuine, full-voiced, actually present singing is more than the Hildegard practice requires for the day. 1 minute of it, done with the full body rather than the careful management of how it sounds, is enough.
Notice what happens. Not what you feel, what changes in the body, the coherence that the singing produces, the specific alignment of breath and intention and physical engagement. The state that Hildegard says is the soul's reminder of what it is and where it comes from. Third, find or build a singing community. Hildegard's theology of music is primarily communal. The individual voice is real and valuable. The community of voices in genuine communal song is something qualitatively different. The choir that has practiced together long enough that the voices have learned each other. The congregation that sings rather than watches. The group of any kind, secular, sacred, formally organized, or informally gathered, in which actual singing happens in actual company. This is the most countercultural thing Hildegard prescribes. The modern world has made passive reception of professional music the standard and actual participation rare. She would say this is the specific, documentable harm of a civilization that has separated the production of music from the experience of it. Find a context in which you can sing with others. Not necessarily in a formal religious setting. Any genuine communal singing practice is the practice she is describing. Fourth, receive music as a dress rather than as resource. This is the shift in orientation that changes everything else. The next time music arrives, genuinely, with the specific quality that makes you stop, receive it as what Hildegard says it is. Not a mood to be managed, not a resource to be deployed, an address, something reaching toward the part of you that exists before the words, the soul speaking in its first language. Let it. Stop doing what you were doing. Stop explaining what is happening. Allow the recognition, whatever it is reaching, whatever it is addressing in you, to be fully received, for the duration,
without the management that the ordinary life requires, and that music, when it arrives at the right moment, is specifically designed to temporarily suspend. I want to close with the image that Hildegard gives us most directly in the Scivias. The description of the heavenly choirs, the celestial beings whose entire existence is the singing of praise, who have no other function and need no other function, who are what they are through the singing and would cease to be what they are if the singing stopped. She is not describing a literal heaven. She is describing the soul's deepest nature. The human being, in Hildegard's understanding, is a creature of praise, a being whose deepest expression is the singing voice, whose deepest function is the sounding forth of what it is, whose coherence is maintained by the specific, physical, full-body act of making the sound that the soul carries.
The soul that does not sing, in whatever form the singing takes, is the soul that has been separated from its primary instrument. The body that does not resonate with music, that receives it as background while attending to other things, is the body that has been disconnected from the vehicle of its own coherence. You were made to sing, not professionally, not beautifully, made to use the voice as the body's primary instrument of soul expression, made to receive music not as resource but as address, made for the specific quality of communal sound that Hildegard described as the closest available experience of the divine. The voice is waiting, the body knows how, and what is reached when you actually use it, what is temporarily restored in the act of genuine, full-voiced, fully present singing, is what Hildegard said the singing was always for. The soul's first language, still spoken in the voice that is yours. Here is the question Hildegard on music leaves us with today. When did you last sing? Not in the background, not under your breath, not the half-conscious humming of a person managing the silence. Actually sing. Your own voice, fully engaged, producing the sound that is the body's most direct expression of what the soul is. And when did you last receive music with complete attention, not as background or mood management, but as address, as something reaching toward the part of you that exists before the words? Leave that in the comments, because naming when it last happened and deciding when it will happen next is the beginning of the practice that Hildegard built her whole theology of music around. The soul's first language, spoken again, in the body, through the voice, right now. I'll see you in the next one.